the question of Franklin after the Constitutional Convention when they finally drafted the Constitution. And the woman asked Ben Franklin, well, what have you given us? Remember what his response was?
Republic.
A republic, ma'am. If that is, you can keep it. Well, keeping a republic and our freedoms given to us by God is a very precious thing, but it relies on something in particular, something that John Adams, our nation's second president, was very well aware of. He said that public virtue cannot exist in a nation without private virtue, and public virtue is the only foundation of republics, the only foundation. Anyway, while she's bringing this up, Noah Webster, which is known as the schoolmaster for America, and he wrote many books. In fact, he led America's educational from its foundational roots. He said he was under the firm conviction that the Judeo-Christian worldview was what was absolutely essential for education in America for us to last as a republic. And Madison, I think maybe that's the only, there we go. Perfect. And here it is. No truth is more evident to my mind that the Christian religion must be the basis of any government intended to secure the rights and privileges of a free people. And if you look at the early educational model that America had, really for the first over 200 years, remember the Mayflower that came over to Plymouth Rock? So from 1620 to 1840, the primary teaching mediums for education not only included the Bible, but famous books like the original Blueback Speller, the New England Primer, and of course, McGuffey's Reader. Parents were widely acknowledged as the primary authority for education, not state officials. And the purpose and order of emphasis for education was, number one, to instill in children a biblical worldview. Number two, to provide a classical education focused on building virtue, good character. And finally, three, to teach proficiency in core academics, the things that we mostly think of today when we think of education. Language arts, history, mathematics. Well, all that changed with these two men. How many recognize these figures? Wow, this is an educated audience. Horace Mann and John Dewey. Horace Mann was the first education secretary in the state of Massachusetts and then finally of the United States of America. And he was the one who believed two main things about education. Number one, it had to be uniform. All children had to be taught exactly the same thing. And number two, it had to be brought under state control. Well, this was a massive shift from what had been the norm in America for all of its history up to around the 1830s. But this is what Horace Mann instituted in America. The next figure that came on the scene was, of course, John Dewey. John Dewey was the signer of the first Humanist Manifesto. He was an outspoken Fabian socialist who believed that socialism would prevail over time, not overnight, not through revolution. And he said this: education is the regulation of the process of coming to share in the social consciousness, and that the adjustment of individual activity on the basis of the social consciousness is the only sure method of social reconstruction. That was his goal. Not the goals we saw on the other page, but to foment and bring about social reconstruction in the name of liberalism and progressivism. He also said, regarding religion, it's the basis of those who do not believe, business of those who do not believe that religion is a monopoly or a protected industry for keeping schools free from what they must regard as a false bias. So he was a very powerful force in American education, and his views started to produce results. And now we're moving up closer to our time. And you're probably familiar with these cases, starting with, in 1962, Engel versus Vitale, where school-sponsored prayer was suddenly ruled unconstitutional by a progressive court. A year later, in Abington School District, school-sponsored Bible reading was ruled unconstitutional. So these were swift and massive changes that started occurring. And the Judeo-Christian worldview in education was starting to be fundamentally replaced by materialism or secularism, starting to become the norm in schools. And of course, this morphed into other terms that many of you have heard of: modernism, postmodernism, posthumanism, and even post-truth. Where do these ideas come from? Well, these are two more figures that I know many of in this room are familiar with. George Hegel, he's famous, the German intellectual, is famous for his ideas behind the dialectic. This was the person who taught that for society to improve, the status quo must always be challenged. Species and antitheses, and these two would compete with one another until a revolt happened to achieve a new status quo and hopefully a better society, a society in the mold of progressivism. And this would go on, and history would continue to improve itself. Well, his ideas were captured by, of course, Karl Marx, who is famous worldwide for Marxism. And these ideas did not die with the deaths of these two gentlemen. In fact, Marx was under the firm belief that a war of class struggle resulting in economic socialism would prevail over the West. But it didn't happen. In fact, even societies loosely based on the biblical worldview prospered beyond Marx's imagining. So with his death, his ideas did not die out. But these figures came and they started what's commonly to be known as the Frankfurt School in the city of Frankfurt in Germany. And this was during the Weimar Republic, before Nazism really started to take hold. Figures like Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, Herbert Marcuse, and the Italian Antonio Gramsci. It was from the Frankfurt School that this worldview or this ideology called critical theory first germinated. These were the figures that came up with this idea. What is critical theory? Well, it's a Marxist-inspired movement in social and political philosophy, a primary goal of which is to overcome the social structures through which people are dominated and oppressed. Have you heard these words before?
Yeah.
Now you know where they came from. And critical theory is a very broad umbrella term for a host of other terms that fall underneath it, like critical legal theory, sex and gender or queer theory, critical race theory, intersectionality, gender fluid, white patriarchy, cis heteronormativity, all which is commonly understood to be under the banner of wokeism. So when you hear this term wokeism, this is really what it's referring to. Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Frankfurt School leader, he believed that if socialism was ever going to prevail in the West, it would not happen through what he called a war of movement, meaning an actual war, like it had happened in Russia. It would rather happen very slowly through taking over the core institutions of society. Any country, he said, grounded in Judeo-Christian values cannot be overthrown until those roots are cut. Socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. In the New World Order, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture via infiltration of schools, universities, churches, and the media, and in time transforming the very consciousness of society. Prophetic words that have turned out to be true. Well, with the rise of Nazi Germany, Marxism was getting a bad rap in Germany, and the Frankfurt School was looking for a new home. And they started shopping around for it in the mid-1930s. And they found a new home. at the behest of this man, John Dewey, at Columbia University's teaching college. In fact, the whole school was brought over in 1934. And from there, they started to go out to America's other elite colleges, including Princeton, Harvard, Berkeley here in California. And they started to plant their Frankfurt School roots in our major teaching institutions. Such that by the 1950s and certainly by the 1970s, the purpose and order of emphasis in America's public school education had completely shifted. In 1950, in the 20 years between 1950 and 1970, the number one goal was no longer to teach virtue or the biblical worldview. That wasn't the number one goal, far from it. Now it was just to teach proficiency in core academics, which wasn't totally bad. And secondarily, to teach a secular worldview. But today, that has changed dramatically. Whereas now, if you look at curriculums, as you all well know, the number one goal is to teach a secular or even pagan worldview, and only secondarily to teach proficiency in core academics. And while government used to work with parents, they used to be friendly toward parents, now the government is actively hostile toward parental influence in the public schools. And the primary teaching mediums, well, it's certainly not the McGuffey Reader or the Blueback Speller, far from it. We have organizations like Rethinking School that are promoting a monopoly of books that are so radical in their nature, it's hard to believe. In fact, you wouldn't believe it unless you were sitting in your position and you'd seen these materials yourselves. In 1983, the results of this thinking started to produce themselves. There was a famous report that was written, A Nation at Risk, that said a rising tide of mediocrity is threatening our very future and nation as a free people. That was 1983. By 1987, the famous Chicago academic Alan Bloom wrote his famous book, The Closing of the American Mind, where he made this poignant statement in the first words of his book. There's one thing a professor can be absolutely certain of. Almost every student entering the university believes, or at least says she believes, the truth is relative. It's quite a statement. This was 1987. A lot of years have passed between then and now. Such as today, we see the results of what Protect Our Kids calls the triple threat. Sex and gender theory, critical race theory, social emotional learning. Kids are besieged today in the public schools by sex and gender theory and gender identity ideologies. In fact, aside from the curriculums, a month doesn't go by. Next slide. A month does not go by that they're not forced by the public schools to at least recognize and acknowledge some kind of sex and gender theory, celebration. Critical race theory, it's in curriculums across the spectrum of teaching protocols in the public schools, like this illustration from Celia's Duckworth, A Wheel of Power and Privilege, where students are asked to identify themselves as to whether they're oppressors or the oppressed. And of course, the Trojan horse of social emotional learning. You won't see a particular curriculum on this. Rather, these other ideologies are promulgated in the public schools through group psychology sessions and therapy sessions, ostensibly to teach kids about self-management, self-awareness, and other good things that parents would approve of. But notice where parents are on this concentric map. We fall in distant third place. Well, how's it all working out? We always hear that the problem with public education and falling academic performance is a function of money. We just don't have enough. We're not spending enough money in the public schools. Well, as this graph shows, the United States spends more per student than virtually every industrialized nation on the planet. For all the money we're spending, academic performance is lagging. In fact, the literacy rate today is lower than it was in 1840, before the imposition of compulsory education in America. And regarding the core competencies, particularly the STEM fields, we lag even more. We're in the middle to bottom rungs in science, math, technology, compared to other nations, most of which spend far less per student than we do. And California, not surprisingly, is lagging behind. We're the most progressive. I mean, we compete against Massachusetts for being the most progressive state in the country with regard to education. We're not doing so well. And parents' rights are diminishing year by year by year. These are just a sampling of a few cases where parental rights have been chiseled away by the courts. One of the most egregious being Fields versus Palmdale School District, where the court said that we hold that there is no freestanding fundamental right of parents to control the upbringing of their children by introducing them to matters of and relating to sex in accordance with their personal religious values and beliefs. Parents are possessed of no constitutional right to prevent public schools from providing information on that subject to their students in any form or manner they select. Now, you're going to hear about some cases from the Supreme Court that are challenging this, but this is still good law in the Ninth Circuit. But it's not the only law. I mean, aside from the court cases, this shows you just a brief glimpse of the 25-plus year history of statutes that have been passed by California legislatures who have totally remade what it means to be educated. And it's not just Democrats that have done this. Republicans are guilty too. But just a few to point out briefly. In 1999, Ray Davis signed a bill that permitted teachers and students for the first time to openly proclaim and display their sexual identity status. Under Arnold Schwarzenegger, gender was redefined to include one's perceived identity, appearance, or behavior, whether or not that identity, appearance, or behavior is different from that traditionally associated with a person's sex at birth. But at least it mentions sex at birth instead of assigned at birth, which would come later. 2013, we had the famous bathroom bill. In 2015, the California Healthy Youth Act, which was the genesis, by the way, for the Protect Our Kids becoming a ministry. And it just gets worse. California is now a gender-affirming care sanctuary state. And it just never stops. Here are more recent laws that have been passed, including one that's being challenged in court today, which you're going to hear more about, AB 1955, the Safety Act, which essentially requires that you all lie to parents in the public schools. And then we have these wonderful proposed laws that you're all familiar with, so I'm not going to belabor these. These changes are affecting our students' views on capitalism, on democracy in general. It is changing them. Look at this graph by Gallup that shows the trend in positive views toward capitalism and socialism by generation. And you'll notice that the youngest Americans, their views are dimming of really what it means to be an American. Pride in being American, not surprisingly, is going down. And why wouldn't it? If you're told month after month, year after year, that America is a slaveocracy, that it's filled with settler colonialists, that our whole system is built on oppression. Why would you have pride in being American? And even personalities today are changing. This famous study that was done by the Financial Times, which has gone viral, is so alarming. Look, and it shows in terms of age, the conscientiousness is going down, But neuroticism, agreeableness, and extroversions are all going in the wrong direction. And that's why we're here today. You all are on the front lines of this fight to literally save our nation. One student at a time. And the only way that is done is for each one of you to stand up and assert their God-given rights, as is told in our Declaration of Independence. Abraham Lincoln famously said in a prophetic statement that the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of the government in the next. If we're to save our country, it's up to us, and particularly you in this room, to turn this around. Thank you for being here. God bless you all.
Just to reiterate Mark's point, America is so bad that immigrants like me waited 5 years in our own home country to go through a legal process to come here and to enjoy the blessings of freedom. So, yes, I meant all of that facetiously. Well, we have our next item here is actually we forgot to add the logo of the UFC here because it's a big battle. This is a very important case that we wanted all of you to be aware of. And Miss Lorianne West is actually here to talk to us about this case. She is one of the litigators from Thomas More Society, together with the lead attorney, Paul Jonah, who in fact, Mark and Paul Jonah just recorded a podcast recently, and it will be posted on POK's podcast here in the next week or so. So if you're interested in hearing a lot more detail than we can cram here in this conference, you can listen to that podcast. We are on Spotify or iTunes, and if you look up Protect Our Kids, you'll see us there. But I'd like to invite Ms. Lorianne West, if you could please come up here and tell us a little bit about this important, very, very important case that's working its way through the court system.
Good morning. My name is Lori West. I would like to thank the Advocates for Faith and Freedom for asking me to share my experience seeking a religious exemption from the Escondido Union School District. I worked for EUSD for 30 years as a PE teacher. I loved my job. I was twice named Teacher of the Year by the Escondido Elementary Educators Association. My case is titled Mirabelli and West versus Olson. Elizabeth Mirabelli and I are the plaintiffs. We brought this action against EUSD because they violated our First Amendment rights of freedom of speech and freedom of religion by requiring us to lie to children and their parents when they did to lie to parents when they denied our religious exemption request. The defendants in this case are EUSD, where we named 10 defendants, including the school board superintendent and others. The California Department of Education, where we named 12 defendants, including Tony Thurmond, and the California Attorney General Rob Bonta. The hand of God was with us when we filed this lawsuit. Judges are randomly assigned. We were assigned one of the only conservative judges in California. Judge Rob. I would like to ask all of you to pray for Judge Benitez's continued strength and help throughout this lawsuit and beyond. In his September 2023 ruling, we got a preliminary injunction, and one of his quotes was, "These policies create a trifecta of harm harming children, parents, and teachers." So why am I here today? EUSD directed teachers to follow a student's wishes regarding preferred name and pronoun. And we were told that this information could not be shared with parents unless the child gives permission. We asked, what if a parent were to ask us a direct question? about their child's possible gender confusion during school. We were told we could not answer that question with the truth that we know, and we were directed to say that is beyond the scope of this meeting. What? Teachers want to partner with the parents. We don't want to replace them. EUSD claimed that asking us to withhold information was not asking us to lie. Why did I choose to step up? Why did I choose to risk my career? How did my involvement with our groundbreaking case, Mirabelli and West versus Olson, come about? I was approached by a longtime friend and coworker, Elizabeth Mirabelli, about joining the lawsuit. She asked myself and a couple of other teachers to join the lawsuit against EUSD over the mandated directives that require us to lie to parents to use a child's preferred names and pronouns. It wasn't easy to step up. I was afraid for my job. I was the only other teacher that dared to join Elizabeth in the lawsuit. I agreed to join the action, but had no idea what I was really getting into. I didn't even consider that I was making a years-long commitment. I would never imagine the terrible treatment I received from my coworkers and EUSD. Now I can understand why my fellow teachers were afraid to join the lawsuit. It has been a long and unpleasant journey, but one that needed to be walked. Now I know that I made the right choice in joining this action, which seeks to protect children, parents, and teachers. I chose to stand up for my religious beliefs. I chose to stand up for the innocence of children. I chose to stand up for right. I chose to stand up for common sense and decency. How does an educator start the religious accommodation process? The first step is to request a religious accommodation meeting and attempt to settle this at the school district level. Elizabeth and I started this process in the fall of 2022, so almost 3 years ago. We requested the religious exemption from the EUSD mandates. At that time, I saw Jessica's somewhat parallel story, and I decided to contact her. We have been in regular contact since then, sharing the updates on our cases. We spent months at the school level trying to get this exemption. We requested to be exempted from the use of pronouns, preferred names, and being forced to lie to parents. We even came in with some solutions. We offered to only use last names instead of preferred names. We also proposed that we would not use pronouns at all. We would just say kids or students. But the only mandate we couldn't come up with a solution was the lying to parents. EUSD accepted our first two solutions, but said they could not accommodate the part about lying to parents. After many meetings and many months, our religious exemption was denied in the beginning of 2023. The EUSD denial left us no choice but to file an action against EUSD for them denying our constitutional rights. We filed Mirabelli and West versus Olson in April of 2023. Now, after 2.5 years, I can really understand why my fellow teachers were afraid to join the lawsuit. It has been a long and unpleasant journey, but it's one that needed to be walked. I know now that I made the right choice in joining this action that seeks to protect children, parents, and teachers. How were we treated when we returned to school after the lawsuit? The lawsuit was filed on Thursday, April 28, 2023. Elizabeth and I both took the next day off of work at our attorney's request. We returned to work on the first Monday in May, and both faced immediate negative backlash from our coworkers. On the first day back, I found an LGBTQ plus flyer on my desk. I also found that I had been subscribed to about 20 LGBTQ organization emails on my work email. I was shocked. I immediately contacted these websites and tried to find out how did I get signed up for this. They couldn't give me any information, how or when I was signed up. I immediately canceled all of them. Elizabeth was also signed up for all these emails. We suspect that a coworker was involved with this because they used our school emails, which is our name. They know our emails. I reported this immediately to my principal. Elizabeth faced harsher backlash than I did the first day back. In addition to the emails we both had been signed up for, Elizabeth found her room plastered with 15 student-made hateful posters that declared Elizabeth and I to be racist and we hate trans kids. One of the posters was a drawing of Elizabeth and I holding hands in a heart that says power couple, Mrs. Mirabelli and Mrs. West. And they were trying to insult Mrs. Mirabelli. The worst part of this incident is that some staff member had to have helped these kids hang and make these posters. Doors are locked. Some adult had access to the room and encouraged or allowed this to happen. EUSD never did anything to protect us against this hatred and discrimination. We came back. After a few days of this hostility, Elizabeth requested a paid leave of absence for the remainder of the year, which is only a couple of weeks. They extended this offer to me and I refused. Why? Sure. So why would I refuse paid time off? Well, at this time, it was the middle of May. I teach 8th grade. I really wanted to be a part of the 8th grade graduation. I look forward to presenting the 2 awards to my top students. And I just always love the graduation. It's the best day. It's the best day and the worst day because I never get to see them again, but I love them so much. I also refuse because I'm a worker. I like to work. I love the kids. I love my job. It really hurt me when they put me out of work. Why did they suddenly force me into paid leave? Suddenly, there were multiple complaints about me. EUSD contacted my attorney in the middle of May saying that I was being placed on administrative leave. I was at work one day and I was never allowed to go back. I never got a chance to say goodbye to the kids. But the harassment was just starting. About 10 teachers coordinated and bought and wore matching t-shirts that said equality in rainbow colors. And they wore them at grade level meetings and staff meetings, and they all sat together. I call this group the bully group. These teachers told students that we hate trans kids. Teachers told kids that this was a money grab. Teacher cried in front of her class about us filing a lawsuit. An EUSD office employee was a member of a group that planned a protest march against Elizabeth and myself in front of our school. They made flyers with our pictures and handed them out in front of the school to the students. These flyers said that our lawsuit would result in slaughtering trans kids. Wow. The day of the planned protest march, they handed out a second flyer, again with our photos and saying terrible things about us. Another thing that happened is I was getting my 30-year longevity award with USD in May. The awards were given to 5-year, 10-year, 20-year, lots of awards in the lower levels. Everyone claps for everybody. Then it was me. I was, of course, the only 30-year employee. And the bully table looked at me with such disdain. They didn't clap. It was just shocking that they can't even be cordial or to their coworkers. The bully gang was all wearing their matching shirts that day. Teachers influenced students to hate me. Sad thing is that these teachers didn't really even know what the lawsuit was about. They just thought it was about us hating trans kids. They didn't know it was about us protecting our constitutional rights. So EUSD put me out of work on May 16th, 2023. They called a meeting to discuss the complaints at the very end of June 2023. There were now 4 complaints. We were told in this meeting, which we recorded, that the investigations have a 30-day timeline. We waited and we never heard anything back from EUSD. We repeatedly asked for updates and we were told nothing. EUSD planned on never bringing me back. They did not want me back. At the end of 2023, my attorney filed a contempt of court case against EUSD. We were in court in mid-January. Judge Benitez was very upset at EUSD over the fact that they hadn't concluded these investigations and hadn't brought me back yet. The judge ordered EUSD to put me back to work ASAP. I went back to work the following Tuesday because Monday was Martin Luther King. We had to request the conclusions of their investigation. We had to request the conclusions of EUSD's investigations again. We finally got an answer in March of 2024. Wow. This started in May of 23. That I was cleared of all wrongdoing. EUSD's long-awaited conclusion was the first time I heard that 2 of the complaints were from staff members. I was never even told about these complaints. So I never even got a chance to say my side of the story. what kind of investigations are you conducting, EUSD? It was shocking. As a PE teacher, I was in a position where boys could possibly be changing in the girls' locker room. Luckily, this never happened while I was there. We did have 2 girls that were dressing in the boys' locker room when I was there. One of these girls was in my after-school fitness class. She told me she wanted to go by a different name. This was difficult for me. This was a confused 6th grade girl. I did my best not to use her name at all. I really liked this kid and I didn't want to hurt her feelings, of course. Am I breaking things? I was pretty sure she was going through a phase. After we filed a lawsuit, she stopped dressing in the boys' locker room. She started dressing very feminine and cute in 7th and 8th grade. Super cute girl. It was a phase. I had the same phase. I hated dresses. I loved playing sports. I was a tomboy. It was great. I climbed trees and fences. I had ice plant fights with all the kids in the neighborhood. These behaviors today would have schools telling me that I'm a boy. Thank God I grew up in the 60s and 70s. What can you do? We have a court date on September 29th asking the court to certify our lawsuit as a class action. When it does this, when Judge Benitez certifies our class action, all teachers and parents in the state of California will be able to join our action. So when the word gets out, the court date is September 29th. He may not actually give the ruling that day. It could come weeks later, but we will let you know. And let all your teacher friends know. What else can you do, teachers? You can drop out of the teachers' union. Yes. I dropped out about a year before I retired. I could no longer have my dues going towards their political nonsense. They don't seem to care about education at all. Teachers, you can go file with that religious exemption. School districts are violating your constitutional rights. Teachers do not have to check their religious beliefs at the door when they work in public education. As teachers, we want to partner with parents and not replace them. Thank you for your time. Yeah.
Inspirational. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. More coming up. The next speaker is our lawyer, Bob Tylor. Brother Bob Tylor, and he's just about everywhere. And he knows so much, and we're so blessed to have him here. He'll be talking about the teacher's legal landscape. After he concludes his talk, he will be introducing somebody very special that all of us know about. All right, so Bob, you're going to introduce that very special person that starts with an S. All right, and then after that, we're going to have a panel that's going to come up, a panel, and you will get to ask questions. And so we'll do a Q&A session with this panel, and then we're going to continue on to the next portion. So without further ado, Mr. Bob Tylor. Great.
Okay. Hello. All right. Hey, I want to encourage y'all today. How many of you here are in education? Oh, wow. I was kind of worried when we were talking about all this, that, we might wind up having a bunch of people who really aren't in education. They're just patriots who show up. But it sounds like we've got patriots who are in education. Praise the Lord for that. We are in a room with lots of warriors. And Ms. West, thank you for standing up. You taking this stand the courage is incredible. Jessica Tapia, she'll be speaking to you a little later. One of our clients who stood up and said, I'm not going to lie to students. I'm not going to lie to their parents. I'm not going to lie to myself by calling kids the opposite gender and doing the things that the school district wanted. And she lost her job as a result. But she gained so much more, it seems, thereafter. Rebecca Friedrichs is here, another time. We stood up to what's, the impossible unions. Sonja Shaw is here. She'll be talking. Mary Barkey, one of our leaders. So many people here, and then I got another name that you might just recognize her face because she's been on Fox News so many times. Julianne Fleischer, one of our lawyers. Has been litigating the same girl sports case that we have for against Martin Luther King High School, and we're involved in so many other things as it relates to that issue. And so, anyways, I want to encourage you all because sometimes it seems incredibly difficult where we stand. But in order to encourage you, let me take you back. Gosh, about close to 30 years. I think I've been practicing about 30 years. Actually, I have been. Took the bar exam in August 30 years ago. Where we sit today is so different and so much better than where we sat when I became a lawyer. 30 years ago, the ACLU had spent years and years. They started in the early 1900s or late 1800s where they were litigating cases and they were battling. And by the 40s and 50s, the ACLU had began to shift this country to remove prayer in schools, to remove the Ten Commandments from courthouses and in school classrooms, to do so many things that it started with, well, you can't teach evolution. And then it went to, it said that you have to teach evolution and you can't teach creationism. And it just went. And things were it just seemed like by 2015, I was at a point where I said, if Hillary Clinton wins this election, I'm closing shop. I practice law as a lawyer. I make money doing normal business, real estate, stuff like that. We've got a law firm that does that. I don't do this to make a living, so, I looked at it and I thought we raise money from people to do this kind of litigation, representing the Jessica Tappias of the world and some of the school districts we represent, the conservative ones. And I thought it's not going to make sense to raise money any longer to file cases in courts if Hillary Clinton wins. Because at that point in time, the only court that we could count on for giving us a favorable ruling, and you couldn't even count on it, but it was the U.S. Supreme Court. And it was a 4-4 split with one in the middle. And you never knew how Kennedy was going to vote. And so, come 2015, we were in a real predicament. And for me, that election was all about the courts. Here in California, the legislatures, we lost it, right? The state courts have, at this point in time today, the last 25, 26 years, we've had Democrats or Republicans who are really Democrats appointing judges. We've not had a conservative governor appointing judges in 25, 26 years in the state of California. So it got to the point where I was just really, I thought, how in the world are we ever going to come back? So if Hillary Clinton wins, I'm done. We're closing shop. And thank God she didn't win. Had she won, she would have, the Ninth Circuit, by the way, at the time, there was one conservative judge in the Ninth Circuit. And that one conservative judge was going into retirement. And, the odds are so far against us. And so what ends up happening in that period of time, Donald Trump wins, and for me, again, it's all about the Supreme Court. It was all about the federal court. So he won, giving us an opportunity today that now we began to see in his era, in his first term, we saw the Ninth Circuit wind up with 14 judges appointed that are Republicans. Some were way back, there's more recent ones. And so, at the point in time as well, we were litigating a case for Chino Valley Unified School District. This is before Sonja. This is back when we had a 3-2 majority, and they were battling for the right to be able to have prayer invocations in schools. And then what ended up happening was we had an election. I had told, prior to the election, I told the school board, I said, look, you're going to lose in the Ninth Circuit because we know who the judges are. My goal is to have one judge and that's this Judge O'Scanlan, to give us a dissenting opinion so that might give us the platform to the U.S. Supreme Court, because you got to get a dissenting opinion. And there's this other process called an en banc review where you ask the entire Ninth Circuit. So, and you have all of the judges can weigh in. Well, what ended up happening is we're at the Ninth Circuit. We've lost. We filed the en banc review asking all of the judges to review it. And we end up losing in the election. We lose a majority. But the Ninth Circuit in our en banc review, we ended up having 8 judges write back and say why the 3-judge panel was wrong, why we should allow invocations at school board meetings. It was amazing. 8 judges. And they were all hiding, frankly, because they were afraid. What ends up happening is now we've got a case and we've got a platform to be able to take the case to the U.S. Supreme Court, because they didn't overturn the prior decision. They couldn't, because we didn't have enough judges. We only had 8 out of about 25. But it gave us a platform. But then we had to dismiss the case. Well, the good news is, thereafter, the laws changed. U.S. Supreme Court comes down and rules in another case that basically reinterprets the Establishment Clause. This is the Coach Kennedy case, a teacher, right, who took a knee on the football field. And so that changed the Establishment Clause and threw out what's known as the Lemon Test, which is for decades has been a detriment to society. One major change with the new Trump Supreme Court. And then we wind up with, more recently, we've got the Free Exercise Clause. And the Free Exercise Clause was a clause that was just, it was flailing and barely staying alive until we get COVID. And guess what? I call it the COVID revival, because COVID brought, it caused people to recognize good versus evil. Yeah. And so many people came out, and the Supreme Court came to our side during COVID and strengthened the Free Exercise Clause in a very, very significant way. And then lots of other rulings. And then Trump gets his second term. And here we are now. We have executive orders on our side as it relates to all the transgender issues, with the LGBTQ indoctrination issues. But what is maybe the most significant thing that has happened? Ever since our Constitution was adopted, there's been this question of, in the beginning, there was no question about parental rights, right? I have an old saying that, my saying, it's not old, it's as old as I am, I guess, that the Constitution wasn't drafted to prevent stupid laws. Right? I mean, there are certain things that everybody knew. You didn't need the constitutional provision to say parents have rights over children. And so the years have gone by, and not until the most recent decision, the U.S. Supreme Court came down with parents and their rights. It was just 2-3 weeks ago, was it? And it's called, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, the Mahmoud case. And it says parents have rights to be able to opt their kids out of LGBTQ curriculum if they want to. So we're in a different landscape now. It's very exciting. We have warriors in this room who can encourage you, but our battle is not yet won. We've got a ways to go, especially those of us in California, because what happens here gets exported to the rest of the country. So we have to stop it here. Now, I want to encourage you with this and kind of the landscape for teachers. Here's my view on how you can best protect yourself, and that is this. You look to the rights of others. For a long time, for teachers, you're an employee. You're an employee of an agent of a school district. As a result, your rights have some limitations. You still have the right to free speech in your personal capacity. You still have Title VII, and I'm not even going through the slides because
Quite a long time ago.
I was asked to shorten this a little bit, so I'm going to shorten it. So we've got the strength of the free exercise clause. We've got the strength of the establishment clause. We have precedent that's coming our way. We now have parental rights. You do have the right to free speech. You do have rights under Title VII, which is the right to request an accommodation, which, yes, indeed, a school district doesn't want to give to Miss West and Mirabelli. But you have that right, and we fought a lot of these Title VII cases. So you have the right to an accommodation and request. You don't have to be forced to be in a situation where you allow a boy into a girl's locker room, those sort of things. But on top of all of that, we now have federal precedent of parental rights, and we've got executive orders from the Trump administration. Okay? And here's the key, in my view, to protect you as teachers. It's this. The courts are always sensitive and more compassionate to government officials and you're a government official, that you're a teacher. They're more compassionate to government officials when the government official is faced with a conflict. What's your conflict? Now, your conflict is this case, the Mahmoud case, says parents have rights. And that runs in the face of numerous state laws. Julianne's smarter than me. She's going to talk to you she's got more time to talk about the individual laws. But you're going to have this issue where you as a teacher are in a conflict. Remember that. Keep that in your head. I've got a conflict because the U.S. Supreme Court has said that parents have rights. Parents have the right to know. They have the right to opt their kids out. The parental rights has been strengthened in a huge way for the first time, really, since our country began with this ruling. So that's one place. You also have a conflict because you have an executive order that is law that conflicts with state law that's telling you to do something. And you as a teacher probably know that there's the supremacy clause, and you're obligated to follow federal law over state law where there's a conflict. And so under the Constitution, you now are in that position. So you have this argument that you can make. There's a conflict. I'm in a conflict. Okay? And use that to your advantage. Always. Even when they say, well, the state law says, yeah, that's not what the federal law says. All right? Use that to your advantage. Julianne will give you a lot more details, but I think we're doing a panel now, right? All right. I want to welcome you, the lady who kicked Tony Thurman out of her school board. Pelosi when she tore up the letter from A.B. Hernandez. And y'all know her, Sonja Shaw. She's running for superintendent of public instruction. And I'll tell you that for me, it's she's a warrior. And she's got my support, and I endorse her greatly. I think that we haven't seen, one of the things, I'm sorry, come here a second. One of the things that allowed Donald Trump to win this year was what happened in the schools. What happened in Chino Valley Unified School District, in Temecula Valley Unified School District. Things that happened here in California put Donald Trump over the victory line because of all of the craziness. And it's because of all these people we've talked about who stood up. And in my view, I think that we can thank Sonja for being a big part of that.
Make it today, but God opened the door and I said yes. So here I am. I first off want to thank God for bringing us all together, because I would say 5 years ago, yes. 5 years ago, I would have never imagined if somebody showed me a glimpse of what this was going to look like, I would have told them they're lying. This is hilarious, right? I was always in the classroom with our great teachers. I was, room mom, PE mom, art mom, anything that wasn't funded, I was the mom. That was there. I grew up, with a childhood where my mom died when I was very younger. She was a heroin addict. My dad was a Christian from Jerusalem, so there's a little bit of history with my past. But the reality was, when I was growing up, I always wanted to be a full-time mom. Through the economy in 2008, God opened the door. I lost my job that was very well paid. And I was able to be a full-time mother, but then I also had a part-time business making sure other moms were healthy. And I was a trainer and also very involved in nutrition. When COVID came, my business had to shut down, and I was stocking groceries and then trying to help my kids with online learning. Long story short, that wasn't going to work for my kids. I pulled my kids. I put them in a charter. I experienced a little bit of school choice. We did have it and still do have in California. As long as 84 doesn't pass. I was driving 45 minutes away and taking my kids to somewhere that was in person, and these other people were taking a strong stance for athletes especially. It was geared towards athletes because, our kids weren't able to stay behind a computer screen. With that said, I always wanted to bring my kids back. Obviously I grew up in Chino. My family, we're raising our family in Chino. And I started to go online, connecting with other parents, and I started to see the horror stories of what some of these kids were experiencing on the online school. And then eventually with masking and reopening the school and all the crazy things that I'm sure you guys are well aware of. And a lot of you, how many are you actually in the classroom? So a lot of you seen firsthand, and it wasn't in your classrooms, but you've probably seen your colleagues as well, because I get text messages till this day from subs that go into these, I call them union activists. Look, you guys are teachers, you're educators, you're amazing. But they go into the union activist class that have no business being in that classroom pushing ideologies on our children. With that said, I started leading a parent group, grassroots, just a bunch of moms, and we always laughed because there was one dad at that time. So we just started, somebody said, go to a school board meeting. Went to a school board meeting. Mind you, I was never involved in politics prior. I didn't even know we were supposed to be paying attention and electing these people. But we quickly found out why they're in those seats. It's because we weren't paying attention. We had 2 board members that were actually listening to us and trying to help, but out of 5 members, that's not a majority. And it just wasn't working. Eventually, we started attending our local GOP meetings. I became an alternate. You can imagine, I just learned what the Republican Party really was. Although that's broken too, and I'm trying to get involved and fix that part too. With that said, it was just a bunch of crazy moms, and they were giving us a voice to fight the good fight for our kids. We knew that elections were coming up, and we had to switch those seats and get people in there that actually cared and that actually wanted to support the good teachers to help our kids get, have a potential future, in education and also after high school. We have 2 seats coming up. We ran an election. Long story short, we were turning into trustee areas, and I never thought I was going to run until one day I came home from a state of the city meeting, which now I'm very familiar with, but I didn't know what that was back then either. And someone said, hey, do you have candidates we can support? And they were from our local central committee. And I said, yeah, we have one. And I was so excited, that we have one. And they were like, it doesn't work that way. You need 2, one for each area. So I went back on Zoom with all the moms and the one dad. And I said, okay, Kelly, to our mom who learned the maps, I said, get out the maps. Everybody give your address. One of you is going to run. We're going to get behind you. And you're going to be the candidate. Long story short, I'm sure you know where that's going. All the addresses go through, and then it comes to me, and I'm like, I'm not in the area. Long story short, my address, I wish I could show it to you guys. Euclid and eucalyptus, and here's my backyard. So it was Shaw 2022. My husband said yes, because of course he leads our home, and the rest was history. Not only did we switch one seat, but we took both of them, giving us a majority of 4-1. I was always asking our school board to be the voice of the community, and they ignored me, even with Title IX when Biden was trying to pervert it back then. I was asking them to be the voice when the tampon law was going through the bill was going through the system before it became law, you know, the one that requires bathrooms, boys' bathrooms to carry tampons. By the way, we do have union activists in our own school sites because we're not filling them. They go into there and try to report us and get us in trouble. That's how sick it is. But long story short, Bill Aselli, you guys all know, previous assemblyman who Trump appointed, he had brought a bill that said if a child was going to identify as another sex, because I don't like to use the word gender and all their dumb religious terminology, because I do believe it's their religion, that we would just notify parents. And I was like, heck yeah, we're gonna, bring a resolution and support this bill. And so we brought the resolution. Bill showed up to our meeting, and he said, I have good news and bad news. Bad news is they wouldn't give it a hearing. Of course, democracy, right? Only if you agree with them. So they wouldn't give it the hearing, but he said, good news is you can bring a policy forward. And I'm like, ding, 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 new school board member, policy, that's the name of the game, right? A coalition was formed of leaders all throughout California. I'm talking Moms for Liberty, attorneys, just so many amazing people, churches. It was just a bunch of people coming together to bring this policy forward. Meantime, I was telling our superintendent, because we had shook hands, because previously I told him that he was going to be out of there and to grow a pair, I'm just going to be honest. And I keep my word, so I told him I'm going to bring a policy forward soon, so get ready. And he kept telling me it was illegal. And I kept telling him, show me the law. And then he gave me pages from the JPA, the insurance company for the districts. No pages cited a law. They just gave mumble jumble on why it's illegal, but never citing the law. Attorneys, same thing. And I said, okay, I'm the uneducated mother, but I'm educated to know that if you're going to tell me I'm going to break the law, just like if I were to get pulled over for X, Y, Z, you better cite the law that I'm going to be breaking. Otherwise, we're bringing it forward. Long story short, it was a light bulb that went off in his head. He pretty much said, Mrs. Shaw, there is no law. You're right. And from that point on, I said, okay, it's time to bring the policy forward. We did. Obviously, Newsom sent Tony Thurmond, the state superintendent, down to bully us. But I was smart enough to know that he was going to do something the uneducated mom knew their tactics anyways. And I had given our superintendent my personal number, and I said, if any of them try to bully you, give them my number. You're not to say anything but talk to our boss, right? Talk to my boss. Long story short, Tony did try. He gave him my number. He ended up showing to our meeting. He tried to shut the meeting. Mind you, we get 30 seconds sometimes in Sacramento if we go and try to speak up against something. And he tried to approach the podium when I told him that we're in this situation because of people like him perverting kids in Sacramento, right? He didn't like that, and eventually he had to leave our school board meeting because I wasn't going to give him the mic. But with that said, within 5 weeks, we were sued by the state for just wanting to inform the parents. We had multiple attorneys reach out to us. You can imagine from all over the nation asking for a case. And eventually the superintendent and I sat down. We looked at who was, winning cases and all these other things. And we ended up taking Liberty Justice. And we went through the court process. And I had to also see the brokenness of what I thought judges were supposed to be fair. He was more concerned about Tony Thurmond's feelings of the board president kicking him out than he was about the legality of our policy. Long story short, we went through a long process, but in the meantime, we were, again, smart enough to realize and listen to where the little kind of gray areas were. We went back to the drawing board. Within that time, we passed another policy that wasn't, quote unquote, identifying certain people in the policy. And from that point, we never stopped to today telling parents if their kids are identifying as another sex. Because if there's a will, there's a way, right? And we're trying to get other boards to do that. We did win in court. They kept saying that kids have a right to privacy from their parents. Even in California, the judge said, no, that's not true. But with that said, we went through so many legal battles just for bringing common sense policies. forward. We were the first ones to get rid of all the flags except the U.S. flag, California flag, military flag out of the classroom. We are still going through a lengthy process through PERB. If you guys, most of you are educators in here, so you know what PERB is. That's supposed to actually be there to help you guys, with your workplace and making sure that you have everything you need to be able to do your job. But hey, I guess a flag that doesn't belong there is more important than making sure you guys have what you need to do your job. With that said, we continue to fight the good fight. We continue to link arms with other school boards, Marietta, Temecula, even Orange when Madison was there. That's how we met. She was the fighter on the board that, another mom just trying to make a difference. God makes no mistakes. Look at where she's at right now. I mean, she's, helping create these kinds of events, which is beautiful. I always say, we may not get that big win, but we are winning because we're coming together and we're continuing to fight the good fight for our kids. And he's right. Even with Title IX, President Trump chose California to open the lawsuit. Why? If we were quiet and we just were submissive, do you think that would help him? No, but we're out there. We're fighting, right? Jessica Tapia and I, we attended, local, even in Yorba Linda, I think that's the one that, kind of went viral. We just attended to support the girls, and we had the insanity coming after us, trying to get in our faces and then switch it around and say that they're the victim. But with that said, we're relentlessly fighting. I always say, guys, you have to be as relentless as them in saving children as they are in destroying children, right? We do. 100%. No matter what, death threats, lawsuits, whatever it may be. By the way, death threats are like a normal thing in our household. Prior, we didn't own guns. We own a few guns, and I have my CCW because I wasn't messing around. My kids all had to take classes and learn how to defend themselves in case of an emergency. I mean, it's just the world we live in. I mean, did I do anything crazy? I always look back and I'm like, God, this is hilarious. They're threatening my life. Recalls, this, that, the other. For what? Because I wanted to inform a parent. Because I didn't want ideologies pushed into a classroom. It's common sense, guys, right? But at the end of the day, it's what it takes. We need to challenge the system, the machine, I call it. It is a machine, but God is bigger than a machine, right? And if we continue to give him our yes, this machine will come down. It's just a matter of time. And every time we take a stand, there's one more person that's able to take a stand with us. Tapia and I always call it Tapia because I'm the last, Tylor, I'm the last name type of person, but we get messages all the time. And all we're doing is trying to open that door and give people a voice to be able to have the courage, we say courage is contagious, right? To fight the good fight. I mean, we have a good fighter right here, Brenda, fighting the good fight. He's a single person on her board. That, we come together and we see all these fighters, Mary Barkey, Kent. I mean, this woman's at every single thing trying to spread the word and help. Linda, I can go on and on in this thing. But this is the beautiful part of it. We cannot give up. We have to continue to come together. We have to continue to try to separate eating each other alive is what I call it, because we always want somebody to be perfect, but God does not call perfection, right? I'm proof. He qualifies the call. I was just a mother that was concerned. She's a teacher that took a stand. We have another teacher that just took a stand. This is what we need to continue to do to help our kids. I am so excited you're here to come together and learn about all of this. I didn't plan on speaking, but I don't want to bore you too long, and I know I have to be somewhere at 11, so I don't want to drive past the speed limit. But I am so grateful to God. And, that would be obviously turned into some other headline. My name is like, whoa, what the heck? Who is this woman? And I'm pretty sure a lot of the good people are like, oh, she's too crazy. She's like, I always get you're a firebrand, and I'm like, I'm on fire for Jesus. Yes, I am. But yes. Take bold stance. Continue to stand in the truth. We need you guys. We need you guys to continue to not obviously feel discouraged, feel the heaviness. Just keep giving it to God every day. Keep giving it to God. Trust me. I can tell you over and over the relentless attacks that we get from the union, especially, which I'm not going to take anything talking about the horrible union because we have somebody here that will tell you all about that. But with that said, they did try to recall us. They're actually over a year and a half with the FPPC thing that I submitted on them. Believe it or not, if I did something wrong, even if it was an accident, I would have been fined and in trouble the next day, right? But over a year and a half because they didn't do the recall stuff the right way. But this last election, if California I mean, they dump tons of money into our elections in Chino, right? And all over that are fighting the good fight. They would have got us out. But we have a 5-0 now, guys. What does that mean? They want somebody in the driver's seat that allows them to do the good work that you guys are doing to clear the noise. And that's exactly what I told our staff. You are not to get into the weeds with crazy Bonta and Newsom and all that. I'll fight them. You do what you have the expertise to do. God made me a fighter since I was a little girl because I had to fight to survive when my mom's a paramedic. We didn't have even food some days. So, I mean, it's just a gift that we were given, right? And I really, truly believe that in my heart. So thank you for being here. Thank you for putting in the time and effort. And please spread the word. Your voice matters. I love you guys. You're amazing. And I pray for protection over you continuously until you get God your yes.
I want to invite our panelists for the Q&A session. So, Mr. Tylor, Ms. Fleischer, Mr. Schneider, Ms. Friedrichs, can you please all come up here? While they're coming up here, just real quick, the previous announcement that Marie was making, I think there's somebody in here that's actually logged into the Zoom, and it's causing the feedback. So you could be recording. We're not against recording. You can do that. It's just that if you're logged into the Zoom, the audio from your phone is feedbacking with the folks that are watching online. So appreciate it. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to come around, and you guys could ask your questions. I'm going to give you, here, you'll hold that one. All right. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. I'm going to come to you. Wait to ask your question if I give you the mic so that way everybody can hear. All right. So let's go ahead. Who wants to ask the first question? All right. Upset.
So I guess as a school board member, we were told by a lawyer in front of everyone to ignore executive orders and to follow state law, because executive orders we won't be accountable for them and we won't lose funding. So we need to follow state law because we're more likely to get in trouble for discrimination or harassment based on state law. And that's what they're telling the teachers. So what can I say back as a school board member?
I'll take that one. Great question. We Bob mentioned this earlier, but we filed a lawsuit against Riverside Unified School District. And one of the things that they said is, they have to follow state law. That's what they're doing. They're following state law. Well, we also sued the state of California, and the state of California came back and said, you know what, it's Riverside's fault. It's their issue. They did something wrong. We're not liable. So we have the school district and the state pointing fingers at one another. And so that's a common statement that school districts or school administrators or school superintendents will say, state law, we need to follow state law. But there's a reason that we have the supremacy clause. Federal law is not something that is just a suggestion. It's something that needs to be followed. And so that may be a nice sentiment to say, we're following state law, but federal law also binds school districts and school administrators. And so they're going to face lawsuits one way or the other. And so we already know that the federal administration has filed a lawsuit in the state of California against CIF, against the state of California. And so these executive orders absolutely carry the force of law. And so, again, an executive order is not just a suggestion to follow. And so the response that I would encourage you, if your board or if district administrators are suggesting or stating you have to follow state law, the response is, well, you also have to follow federal law. And all later during my segment, we'll talk about some of the things that you do in terms of if your school district is violating federal law and some of the steps that you can take. But federal law is not a suggestion. It's something that must be followed through.
Any other questions? David, one more.
A lot of our members are calling us, asking us to do AB 5 LGBT cultural competency training requirement that's ending this year. Are you guys, do you know if there is a possibility of an opt-out or this foundation opt-out for that training?
I'm just going to repeat the question real quick because I don't think that was on the microphone for those on Zoom. Question is whether we're challenging the AB 5 requirements that teachers go through this curriculum training. It's called
LGBTQ cultural competency.
LGBTQ cultural competency.
Yeah, PRISM is the
PRISM. That's what it is. Okay, here we go.
All right. So currently we don't have challenges. I know Sonja Shaw has been very vocal, brought PRISM actually to our attention, and we've been going through one of the pamphlets and just the outrageous ideology that's being pushed through this. There's a couple of issues, and what we've had a few teachers reach out to us, and what we've been encouraging them to do, if they can request a religious accommodation to it, whether that will be honored, likely not. The issue is that employers are often allowed to present presentations or trainings, and as the employee, you're obligated to go through that presentation or the training. The issue becomes when you have to actively engage in a presentation. You know, sometimes it's a click through and you have to affirm, you know, the statement or the presentation. But participating in the training, there's not a lot of legal leeway there. However, we are still encouraging teachers and administrators to request an accommodation from that training. It's quite frankly not necessary. You already have a duty to treat students respectfully, to not harass students. Those are already obligations and duties that quite frankly don't need to be covered in I forget how long the training is. I know it's quite lengthy. So you can submit an accommodation, and later I'll kind of walk you through how you can submit that accommodation request. But mere participation, listening to the training, there's not a lot of legal recourse, unfortunately. We are still looking into ways to see, you know, from a legal perspective, how we can challenge that requirement, but we're not quite there yet.
So earlier you guys said something about federal law being above state law. So doesn't that apply here, since Trump had put something in about not having LGBTQ stuff? And do you know what I'm trying to say? Is since Trump's in office and is doing away with DEI and LGBTQ, does that also apply in this case to that AB 5? Because we also got the training, but we didn't have to sign our name on anything, but we were mandated to sign into the course and sit through it and then sign out again. So we sat for an hour, but we didn't have to agree to it. But the federal law, that's okay.
So the difference, and I might not know what executive order you are specifically referencing, but again, it comes back more to the training, the type of training that employers can enforce. So whether you're working for a government entity, a state, which a school district would be a state entity, they could still present training and require training. If I remember right, I believe the executive order that you might be mentioning, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, it did deal with the topics of sex and gender identity within federal documents. And, but as far as a school district being able to compel someone to sit, listen to this training, click through slides, the school district would be allowed to do
that. Teacher at high school, local high school, and when we are in our staff meetings, and at the end of the staff meeting, our local Apple rep, which is our district union, loves to place the red badge of courage on my chest by saying, if you're not part of the union, it's your time to get up and leave now. I usually leave before he gets the pleasure of saying that, but I'm wondering, am I able to stay in that meeting? Not that I really want to, but there are sometimes they're going over collective bargaining as far as, you know, our raises and medical, and I would like to hear that information. It does place the, you know, big red flag. There goes Holly. She's, you know, the 1 in 100 that aren't part of the union. But I'm just wondering what my rights are. Do I have to leave that meeting? I'm not ready to put up that fight yet, but I sometimes wonder what would they do if I just said, no, I'd like to hear what's going on.
Go ahead.
So I don't know the legal answer to your question, but that union is your monopoly bargaining agent, and there's nothing you can do about that. Whether you belong or don't belong, they're representing you. So you have every right to stay in that meeting and to hear all the words that are spoken, because it's going to impact you and your contract. Where to find the courage to do it? I don't know. That'd be hard. But I encourage you to try it out. Yeah, they can't kick you out. They used to do that to me too. It's just a way to bully you and to make you, intimidate you, and hope that you'll come groveling back to them.
I have a slightly different answer. I'm sorry, but I think there's probably a distinction between when they're talking about the collective bargaining issues, when they're arguing on your, when they're talking about issues on your behalf, that maybe you have the right to be able to stay in, like Rebecca was saying. But on other issues, when they're talking about other matters, you probably don't have a right, because there is a private right of association under the First Amendment where they could exclude those who are not members. So I think it's probably, I think you're right, but I think it's probably limited to those issues.
And they never put out an agenda, so I wouldn't know what and when they were planning to discuss that. So
you might demand that they put an agenda together so that you know when they're talking about issues that relate to you, when they're negotiating on your behalf.
Thank you.
And at the top of the meeting. Put it at the top of the meeting agenda so that that gets dealt with first.
I'm not sure they can control that, but
No, within the union's time. Not at the top of the.
But she's talking about in private union meetings, not school.
That's what I'm saying. At the top of the private union meeting, have them deal with the negotiation portion first, and then she can leave.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but she can't control their agenda.
She can ask.
She can ask, sure.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yes.
This is a Mahmood versus Tylor question, and I did send you guys some documents. My question is how Placentia Belinda Unified School District is handling the situation. They are demanding that parents give detailed analysis of their religious beliefs, that they show how the material at hand significantly impacts their religious beliefs. And then the district will conduct a fact-intensive analysis and make the decision as to the validity of the parents' religious claims. Is this consistent with Mahmood?
All right, who wants to take that one? It looks like the district wants to become a clergyman.
Yeah, so first of all, after Mahmood, we, on our website, if you go to faithfreedom.com, there are opt-out forms that we created. Okay, so for parents, doesn't say this violates our, these issues violate our religious liberty. We come across some of these questions so far, and Mahmood doesn't expressly address this, but Mahmood does appear, this is the Supreme Court case giving parents rights to opt out. It does seem to put the onus on the school district, not on the parents. And so an argument certainly can be made that parents don't need to justify their religious beliefs and how it impacts their religious beliefs. What they're trying to do is they're trying to turn this into a free exercise case by asking those questions, when it's not necessarily a free exercise case, free exercise of religion, it is a parental rights case. And so under the doctrine of parental rights, parents have the right to direct the upbringing of their children. And they don't necessarily have to come in my view, and give a lengthy explanation as to why they oppose these certain issues. So anybody who has a family, who's experiencing this with your Belinda, please let us know, because we're actively hoping that some parents will step up so that we can strengthen Mahmood and fight back, because this is the only way that we're going to be able to push back and force school districts, in California in particular, to recognize the breadth and strength of Mahmood Otherwise, they're going to do this. They're going to make it difficult on parents to try to tell parents, well, you have to come in and tell us every page of curriculum out of 10,000 pages. Pick the pages and tell us when what pages you would post, and that's not going to be so.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that because we have had a parent reach out and their district said, okay, we'll consider your request. Here's a link to 10,000 plus pages. Identify each page number that you have an objection to, and then we'll consider your request. And so the school is now trying to put the burden on parents. That is nowhere found in the mood at all. And so to the extent of, with parents fill out these religious opt-outs, we do encourage parents to be as detailed as possible. We would recommend that they use our form because it is important to identify that religious objection. And it's something that actually we're working on. We're actually working on expanding our opt-out form. Because right now it is focused on LGBTQ curriculum because that is what Mahmood addressed, but we believe that Mahmood is actually much broader than that. When a parent has an objection to curriculum that conflicts with their family's religious beliefs, they have a right to opt their child out. And so we're working on expanding that opt-out form. So, if a parent or a family has an objection to books that may discuss dark magic or witchcraft that could violate, their family's religious beliefs, they should be able to opt their child out of those books or those assignments. So, yeah, absolutely. We're seeing, school districts trying to put the burden on parents, and that's not what we believe Mahmood to stand for. And so we are hoping that parents push back and absolutely have them contact us if their school districts push back on those.
Just to add on to that, Mahmood was a very expansive case in this language. But like all Supreme Court cases, they can't get into the weeds of every single eventuality or circumstance that they're going to run into. So I would really encourage you to view this as an opportunity to further frame the application of that case by these local contests. There's lots of legal help in this room and elsewhere. Now is the time. We have a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court. We have a very friendly court. The word is starting to get around, and it's up to us to force the issue, to further magnify the ramifications of this case so that you won't run into these issues in the future.
All right, we're going to take one last question with this panel. There's going to be more Q&A time later, okay? So one last question.
Actually, it's an add-on. I'm in the KYL district. I'm with Holly, not in the union. I'm a teacher. But a little blip under the blanket. Principal relate to us with this whole thing because they're just copy pasting the email and sending it out and they're being really kind. But the district had the principals over the summer that were available go through curriculum and earmark so they know where the sticky parts are. They're not telling parents, but they told teachers, we're going to talk to you at grade levels and individually so you're either going to teach this or you skip it. And if you don't want to skip it, be ready to feel, the pushback from parents. So they know where the sticky parts are in the accepted curriculum already, but they're not telling parents. So I'm a parent and a teacher. But at my elementary school, that was the information I was given. So if we could request, what did you find over the summer that you think we might be pushing? I don't know that they will comply, but just a little hint of they know.
Are you going to be Belinda?
Yes, was at your Belinda 25 years.
All right, let's give our panel a big hand. Thank you.